Hey guys, welcome back to Spill the Tea. This is episode 4. Today I have one of my professors, Cameron Rennacker. He is joining me for this podcast, and I really appreciate him taking the time to kind of join me for this out of his busy schedule. As we kind of get into the conversation, you're going to understand why I feel like the time that he's giving me here is very valuable because he's a very, very busy person. And kind of once again, I appreciate him taking the time. Just give like a quick introduction to him. Today's guest is Cameron Rennacker. He's an entrepreneur, educator, creative director, and researcher who sits at the intersection of design strategy, human-centered systems, and storytelling. He is a professor and a PhD student in Arizona State University. He's the co-founder and head of creative at Rennacker Studio. He's worked leading designs across packaging, UX, and brand systems, and more than 24 multi-million-dollar brands from Yamaha Motors and PetSmart, working on early stage startups as well. So, welcome along, Professor. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add? I feel like I may have covered a lot of what you kind of do, but if there's anything that you want to add to what you're doing, because I know that kind of the things that you do right now, it's kind of encompassing so many things that I don't know which one would be like the ideal kind of
Yeah.
tag that you'd use.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting space. You hit on most of them. And despite all of those things that you sort of touched on, one of the things that you sort of hit on a little harder than the rest is how busy I am. And I think one of the things that I'd like to point out is that I'm actually not as busy as everyone might think I am, even with everything going on. And I think that something that might be interesting as we go through the podcast is just talking about efficiency and how to make yourself less busy and make yourself able to achieve more of the things that you want to achieve in, it may not be a less amount of time. You may actually take more time with it, but that was something that I registered with. And then the entrepreneurial component, we could probably dig in. I think everyone knows what a professor does. Everyone knows what a PhD student does. But
Yeah.
I think that we can probably drill in on the entrepreneurial component.
For sure, definitely. Kind of warming up into the conversation, it kind of relates to what we just spoke about in terms of your identity or the tag that you'd use for yourself. For anyone meeting you for the first time, how would you introduce yourself? Like, would you just define yourself as a designer, educator, researcher, or just like a, mix and match of all of it?
Yeah, that's sort of the chronic issue I face is like, how do I take everything that I do and put that into like a few words that everyone understands? And that's been an increasing challenge that I can't say that I've mastered entirely just yet. But oftentimes I usually just default to I'm a designer. Everyone knows what a designer does. And then if they're inquisitive and they have more questions, I can go a little bit deeper. I can say, oh, well, I run a business. I have a studio. I teach it, right? No one knows what graphic information technology is. I usually just default to, it's a really annoying way to say design. But outside of that, I also am studying human systems engineering, which again is just a really annoying way to say design mixed with research about people and psychology. So again, this is actually something that I think is really interesting is even for us as designers is how we ask questions matter. And if you come up to me and you're like, what do you do? I'm going to tell you I'm a designer. But if you're more inquisitive and you want to go deeper, I'm going to tell you more and I'm going to reveal more information to you. So high level, I will, depending on the crowd that I'm in, I will usually go with designer or creative strategist or researcher. I'll usually start at one of those 3 points and we'll move out from there.
It's kind of like that you have these puzzle boxes that you kind of start, and then as you solve one part, you open up into a little bit. I think that's also kind of like how introductions go, I feel, with a lot of people.
What are those called? Like Russian dolls where they get
Russian
bigger and
nesting
bigger?
dolls, yeah. As you kind of
Right.
open it up, it goes to more and more, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have the same problem yet. I'm trying to be. I try to be kind of active in like different spaces as much as I can, podcast being like one of them as well. So I can kind of relate. I mean, for now, I think my lead tag would definitely be just master student at ASU. So we
I'm
can,
gonna latch on to a word you're using, and that's the word just.
okay.
Just as in minimizing, and don't minimize that, right? Like being a master's student, being a graduate student is a lot bigger than most people give it credit, right?
Hmm.
Um, don't say just like that.
All
That's
right.
really noble. That's a lot of work. It really is a lot of
It
work,
is
especially
for
if
sure.
you're coming from an external field
Yeah.
where maybe you're studying something that you didn't go and get your undergrad in, or even if it's something that you've never worked in. That's not easy. Just is a weird word. So, anyways,
I appreciate it. I shall take that out of the terminologies that I use for when I'm defining myself for sure.
yeah,
I think we can just kind of straight up move into the questions, and then from there we can kind of see where it goes.
great.
So we'll start off with your career paths and your pivots because you've led design work for established brands like Yamaha and PetSmart, kind of mentioned in the introduction, as well as early stage startups, right? So what did you learn about design decision making in those very different contexts? Because obviously each of those products work with such a different market that you're kind of going to have to keep changing it.
I'm gonna default to a quote from Massimo Vignelli, and I quote this all the time, which is if you can design one thing, you can design anything. And so I think that's what's given me the context to switch between a lot of things. Now, my background started in enterprise work. So initially, I started working at Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries. Then I ended up moving on to Yamaha Motors, and then I ultimately moved on to PetSmart. And that was a lot of knowledge that I could gain from other people working at those spaces, particularly early on in my career. And I think that that's really valuable. Oftentimes, when I'm working with students today, they there's a lot of students that may want to go and start their own business or freelance or maybe even work for a startup. And that's all great. That's all noble. I will never maybe there's a few students that I would say, man, maybe that's not a great idea. But I would never pull someone off of their high bar, right? But I do think that there's an important reality check to have at some points. I tell my students often that nice and kind are two different things. And my version of that in this context is that I'm going to do the kind thing, but maybe not the nice thing, and tell you, maybe not. So that working at big corporations allows you to learn from so many different people. I don't know that I would be the designer that I am today if I didn't go and work at some of those big companies, particularly PetSmart. I think a lot of my steep in the knowledge about design really came from an incredible team that I worked with at PetSmart. Um, I still collaborate with those people frequently, which is uncommon in a
True.
lot of workspaces. After you leave, it's like, okay, bye, never talk to you again.
Yeah.
Maybe a LinkedIn message 10 years down the road when they're looking for a job, right? Whatever it might be. So, getting to your point, those big companies really taught me a lot about what it is that I needed to do in this career and what I liked about this career. And then COVID came around and I actually got laid off from PetSmart, which was kind of devastating to me because at that point in my career, I'm like, oh, I love working at PetSmart. I can bring my dog to work. I get to work on a bunch of different projects. Those projects have at least national, if not global recognition. They are massive budgets. It was a beautiful place to work.
Hmm.
But I was hit really hard when I got laid off. But it also gave me an opportunity to shift my thinking. Where prior I had worked for nothing but really big companies, Fortune 500 companies. And now I was in this new position where I had a lot of knowledge that I could probably apply to a different domain. And I said, okay, what if I did find a smaller place to work that maybe wasn't 200, 300 people, but maybe like 2 to 5 people. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up going, and there were a few stints in there that I don't put on my resume. Like I got, just to like keep the lights on and cover the bills, I ended up taking a job at a really unethical tile company.
Oh wow.
With,
Okay.
you would think that, like, okay, how do you get unethical with tile? Well, after I was there for like a couple of weeks, I was sort of digging into information and listening to some of the things that they wanted me to do, and they wanted me to like design their website in a way that would subvert tax laws, and I was
Oh,
not,
okay.
not my friend. So I ended up doing that for a little bit, and then I left. But I found a really, really small vitamin and supplement company
Yeah.
where this is going to sound completely narcissistic, but they treated me like a god. Um, I came in, and prior to me, they had I think he had a background in industrial engineering or something like that. He had previously worked for like Lockheed on parachutes for airplanes and things.
Okay.
This is a vitamin and supplement company.
Yeah.
Um, and they were selling products primarily on Amazon, which, if you aren't familiar with that sales environment, they take like 30 to 40% of the cut of whatever you sell on their platform. So, like, huge margin depletion. Um, and not only that, but their product line was in, for lack of better terms, shambles. They were selling, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, they were making money, but there were opportunities for a better solution. And they actually hired me as a product photographer, products and lifestyle photographer, mainly so that they could start marketing their products on social media and diverting people back to Amazon to buy their products. And I heard everything that the stakeholders wanted. I said stakeholders, stakeholder wanted.
Singular.
This very small company.
Yeah.
And everything that was coming in, I was like, all right, we're doing this wrong. And so what I ended up doing was I gave them what they wanted. It's my first couple weeks at this company. I need to take some time to understand what it is that I'm working with. Why do they want what they want? Understand the business, understand the new personalities that I have to compete with, or not compete, but contend with.
Yeah.
And I very quickly realized, you know what? There's a huge opportunity. I can use the knowledge that I have from working at these enterprise companies to make this company so much better,
Yeah.
and make them more money and potentially give me more opportunity as well. So in my side time while I was working there, I just started redesigning their brand and redesigning their products. And my background at PetSmart was in packaging, so I could do that. And I had a lot of photography experience, so I could continue to do that. And ultimately, I took their primary brand and I redesigned it, redid their packaging. They, at the time that I was hired, they had probably 20 products, and I swear every single product was in a different size, different color bottle. This is not rocket science.
Yeah.
We can create some efficiency here, and we can order in larger bulk, which will save us money and all kinds of stuff. So that's what I did. I just created a design system that, one, gave the brand more equity and recognition, because up until that point, the only thing that was holding each product together was the logo on the product.
Bar. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it was like, okay, how can we make this a system where we're showing features and benefits in consistent areas? How can we billboard a shelf if this did go to retail? Like, really thinking beyond what their current ecosystem was. And then I also designed a website for it, because that was something that I knew was a huge loss of revenue. If you're sending something to Amazon and they're taking 30 to 40%,
Yeah.
that's 30 to 40% margin that you can have back in your pocket. So I did that, and one day I'm a little touchy about like people over my shoulder. Like, I kind of like to work in private and then have a big reveal.
Yeah.
I still like to include people in that process, but when I'm doing something and I'm like trying to have this big reveal at the end, I like that big reveal. I like Jaws hitting the floor. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Um, but the CEO walked by my desk one day and he was like, "What is that?" And I was like, that's your new brand." And he's like, "This is great. I love it. Let's do it." We spent probably $1.5 million or something along those lines just to roll out the new brand. And when I first joined the company, they were making about this number always gets a little fuzzy for me, but I want to say that we were making about $3 to $4 million a year
Mm-hmm.
in profit.
Yeah.
So obviously the net was a lot higher.
Mm.
By the time that I left, they were making closer to $13 million a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we did some exponential growth.
Mm.
And even through that, we launched several other brands that kind of had the same approach to it, but different target audiences. So our primary brand was like focused on kind of like grandma's supplements, you know. But then we went for a much younger audience with another brand. We went for like a child audience with like the Flintstone gummy kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe that was a millennial thing.
Oh no, I relate to that. So I don't know, maybe I fall in the same category then.
All right, but we did it, and it helped the business grow. So from a creative perspective, and this is a really long answer to your simple question, but
No, that's fine.
working in those big enterprise companies helped me see, oh, this is how business works. And I think that was really helpful for my career.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, that work inspired me to go back and get my master's, and now I teach it, and
Everybody
it's a
does.
snowball.
That's actually interesting because, so like you mentioned earlier, like coming from a different background, right? Obviously, I do come from an architecture background. So there are obviously very like clearly defined parallels between architecture and like UX design and kind of the design industry kind of do run parallel to each other. So there's a lot of resonation, I think, with the one topic where you mentioned about working with enterprise rather than smaller companies to begin with, just because you get to interact with so many more people and you get to learn a lot more. I feel like that's actually different from what people tend to tell. Like when they give advice to like where you want to work, they always say like you might want to start working at like a smaller company because the responsibilities that you're going to get are so much larger, which then correlates to you learning a lot more. So maybe like for me that distinguish would be like I know that what would be the give and take? Like there obviously is more opportunity to work in a smaller company because you're going to have a lot more responsibilities, a lot more tasks, and you're going to have to do and achieve all of those targets because you're required to do so. Whereas in a larger company, you're going to probably have less responsibilities, but you have the option to learn from the people there.
I think that's a little bit of a misconception because I'm going to put this quote out there: make mistakes on someone else's dollar, right? If you can
Okay.
do that, that's a really good thing.
Hmm.
I often say that I've learned some of my best mistakes by or I've learned some of my best lessons by making some of my biggest mistakes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that those mistakes would be as well forgiven in a smaller company.
That's a fair
um,
point. Yeah.
Mistakes, particularly in our industry, maybe not so much in UX,
Hmm.
but definitely like when I was working in print, mistakes can be incredibly costly.
True.
uh,
I
in
can
in
understand.
the hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars level of costly. Um, and in my experience, if you make that mistake at a smaller company, they're going to be very keen to let you go.
Okay.
um, so that's why I would say start at a bigger company is because, yeah, I mean, you don't want those mistakes to become habitual, but we're all human.
Yeah.
Um, and you, it's much harder to make those mistakes because you have the guidance that you need.
Yeah.
Whereas in a smaller company, yeah, you might be given a lot more, um, dare I say, impactful tasks,
Hmm.
but also as a young designer, you might experience paralyzation from that as opposed to empowerment.
Okay.
And that can that can sort of kick the pylon out from under you. And then the whole thing collapses, and you're like, "Is this the right field for me?" And don't get me wrong, you're going to have those questions
Of
about
course.
yourself, no matter what. That's called imposter syndrome. That's a bigger thing. But I think that's why I would say gravitate towards a larger company or a larger organization. It doesn't have to be a company.
True.
Another really good element of exposure is if you can get into public work early, that gives you so much insight into how other people think about your work. Whether it's public facing, and let's say you send out a campaign and it makes some residents a little cranky, that you learn from that.
Yeah.
You develop really thick skin rather quickly. So I think my comment stands on, like, find a large organization, that way you can make some of those mistakes on someone else's dollar. Then you can kind of whittle your way into working at a smaller company. I don't think I would have been as successful in my implementation and rollout of the new packaging at the vitamin and supplement company had I not had that experience. I don't think I would have even seen the business value had I not worked at a larger company first, where you're learning terms like ROAS, return on ad spend, or margin, right? I mean, some of those are just like very simple business terms.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a lot of us as designers or architects or whatever industry you're in, maybe you don't get that unless you're going to business school, right? Anyways, I would say make mistakes on someone else's dollar. And I think that also plays nicely into freelancing, because you go into freelancing, all of those mistakes are going to be made on your dollar.
Yeah, technically one of the worst ways you can go. If you're trying to learn, then yeah, for sure, that's not the kind of place you want to be at. And I feel like that's also an interesting point. A lot of people tend to make those decisions from a very optimistic point of view, in terms of just like, if everything works out, working at the startup is going to be the best choice. But then quite often everything's not going to work out. So I think factoring in the aspects of probably making mistakes is a very, very strong point. I do agree with what you're talking about. So,
and you also have to think about your appetite for risk, right? If you're, I'm going to throw out a probably unrealistic scenario for most people. If you're a trust fund baby and you have millions of dollars that you can sort of pass away to, sure, go and create a startup and have a nice day with it. I don't think that's the case for most people, unless I'm living in a completely different reality, which is possible. But I think most of us probably don't have that appetite for risk. And even if we do have a wealthy stance in the world, I think it's still healthy to be a little bit conservative when it comes to your degree of risk that you're willing to take.
True.
Anyways.
Onward. 100%, yeah. So, kind of talking about, the start from where you work with PetSmart, and then you work with Yamaha, and then you work with the company. You kind of then pivoted to start your own kind of entrepreneurial career, just so to speak. So you kind of co-founded Rennacker Studio, and you basically led cross-disciplinary brand and product work. What do you think is the gap that you see in the design world that kind of made you want to start your own studio?
That's a good question.
Or was it a gap that you saw that you wanted to start it from?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about design, is like, we're not always filling a gap per se, right? Yeah. We just might be offering a different approach. And I had actually started Rennacker Studio in theory well before I even was at PetSmart. I actually started it back when I was in undergrad. But back then we were just doing photography.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, there's always a gap for photography, and sure, we started with portraits and things like that. Anyone can do that kind of work, but anyone with a camera, right? which at this point is everyone.
Yeah.
So the gap that we filled wasn't anything new and unique, but what we did offer was sort of this. Once we had gained our experience and made some mistakes on someone else's dollar, what we did offer was a high degree of experience in a lot of different areas. Not many individuals, because at that time we were just one person. Hi. Uh, not many people can say that they are an expert in print, packaging, web, photo. I'm not going to say video, but could do it. Um, not many people can say that they're experts in so many generalized fields, which I can do. Oftentimes, if you have a project that needs those things, whether you need a brand and a website and some marketing photos, those would be separate contractors that you would need to hire.
Yeah.
And where that becomes a big solution for our customers is that they don't need to go and find a bunch of people. And even for us internally, I don't need to go and find a bunch of subcontractors to bring onto the project to work on for a little bit and then they're gone. We can do it all in-house where our clients kind of see us all the time. They can come back to us multiple times. It's not like, oh, we did this campaign, they were really good at that, but I don't think they do this. No, we do it all.
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason we aren't specialists in whatever it is that you want to do, we can always find that specialist. So I think that's really the gap that we fill in the market, to use your term. But really, it's not necessarily a gap, because there are a lot of big agencies that can do very similar things, but they have a staff of 30 people.
Yeah.
We have a staff of round about 3 people. So what we can also offer because of that is we can keep our prices relatively competitive and much, much lower than a big agency a big agency isn't going to get out of bed for less than $250,000 typically. Yeah. We'll get out of bed for $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. Those are all comfortable for us.
Yeah.
And we work with the client, big or small, to figure out what is actually achievable within their budget, as opposed to us being like, we need this big $30,000 whatever. We will work within the budget that our clients have, and that's unusual in the agency space for sure.
Okay. That's actually interesting because a lot of people, they may tend to frown upon starting their own studio for that exact reason. It's interesting that you took that as the main reason for kind of starting it off, because a lot of people are just like, wait, if I start my own thing, then I have to do this part of it, this part of it, this part of it, and I don't know if I can actually do it. But then again, it kind of leads back to the fact that if you feel like you're confident about yourself in terms of doing those different aspects of it, you're gonna learn from your mistakes. You're gonna be able to do those things at some point. So you have to take that decision with a not just a grain of salt, with quite a bit of salt before you can actually make that pivot. But no, I kind of understand. I think that makes sense.
And that's the big thing, right? Like I'm at a point in my career where I've worked with some really large companies, where I've learned those tools or those techniques or whatever it is that we're approaching, and those are transferable. So, and actually, largely speaking, we just had a client that came to us Thursday, and there's a potential for them to be one of our largest clients we've ever had. And staring down the barrel of the project that they want us to do, none of it is anything that we've ever done before. But I can look at the project and say, oh, okay, well, this is really just pieces of this kind of project that we've done and pieces of this. And then, yeah, this part might be new, but it's really not anything novel. Like, there's examples of this out there. So I can look at all of that and say, all right, there's a path forward here. We're going to have to work out some kinks in the process. There's always going to be kinks in how that specific client likes to work, or how the timeline is going to progress, whatever it might be. There's always going to be little things that you're going to have to suppress or work on or improve about. But by and large, if you've done something, you can probably create an extension to whatever this new thing is. And again, that just goes back to your appetite for risks and whether or not you if you do make a mistake, is that a mistake that you are is that a mistake that you have $1 to put towards?
Yeah.
And we're at a point within the studio where we are comfortable taking on a certain degree of risk. Um, maybe not a huge amount of risk, but that's why we wouldn't bid a project that we're not super sure about.
Yeah. So, kind of talking about how you actually, kind of receive these job opportunities. Are they like, because I know that when I was working as a landscape architect in Dubai, we used to obviously provide pitches. There used to be like a call for, tenders or like proposals basically for certain projects. Is that the same way that it works for you guys? So they have like a mass kind of call for proposals, and then you guys submit one part of it, and then after that they kind of give it to you?
There's actually three ways that we go about it, at least for our studio. I'm sure that there's more out there, but I would say that for the most part, and this is very unusual for a creative agency. For our agency in particular, most of our business actually comes through word of mouth.
Okay.
That is not normal, but that's because we facilitated really good relationships with the people that we've worked with in the past, and that's also been we're not a fast growing company, and we don't care to grow fast. We like the slow growth, and we're very very selective about the people that we partner with and that we work with for our studio. So word of mouth is really how our studio has grown to the point where it is, which is not huge. I will admit that, but that's way number one is just word of mouth. Way number two is co-working. So we have partnerships with three or four different agencies, both within Phoenix and California, that, and you might also bucket this under word of mouth, but they pitch us on their projects.
Okay.
They know the kind of work that we do. When they're at capacity and when they're overflowed, they will push work down to us. And we actually have one agency that we've worked with where we are essentially their creative director now.
Oh,
And
okay.
we step in on almost all of their projects as long as the budget works out fine. Um, and we just co-work with them on projects. It's a subcontracting agreement basically. And then yes, the third option is going in and responding to proposals, um, or RFPs.
Yeah,
RFPs,
RFPs. Yeah.
request for
Yeah.
proposal, and those are typically issued by government agencies. Or at least that's the experience that I have with them. Is primarily with government agencies. You can have large companies that submit RFPs as well, but you kind of have to be in the network for that, and I don't have time for that. So I like networking, but I'm also slightly introverted. So for me, it's just like, all right, I'd rather network through my network, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, which goes back to word of mouth. That said, those RFPs are actually a really big deal. When you're creating an answer to an RFP or you're drafting a proposal for that request for proposal, um, it can get a little stressful. There are certain sections that you go through. Typically, the uh, entity or the agency that has created that RFP has a certain way that they want you to respond to the
Yeah.
proposal. You have to look through it very scrupulously and look for what is it they're actually asking for. You have to draft a budget around what it is that they're asking for, which often has to be exponentially larger than what it is that you're anticipating. But then you also have to be competitive because with most government agencies, it's always a race to the bottom because they're working with taxpayer dollars. But then you still have to deliver something of quality. Like it's a weird balancing act that
Yeah.
it. Don't get me wrong. When you win a proposal, it's very very fun. But the act of responding or answering to those proposals is a little bit awful.
Okay.
I was looking for a more conjugated word there, but awful seems like the right word.
Would you say that it's awful primarily because it could be like monotonous if you're just kind of doing that same thing? Because I feel like that was one thing that my boss used to kind of like always try and pass it off to. Like initially, obviously, so like there was a small growth in the company. There was a very small firm that I worked for. There were maybe about five of us when we started, and then by the time I left, we were at about 10 people. So when it came to RFPs, she would always kind of initially do it herself. And then it got to a point where she was just like, all right, I'm not doing this anymore because it's kind of blocking my creative process in the sense of like I'm wasting too much time doing that. So she would offload that to myself or to the other people in the company just because we had to follow that strict guideline in terms of doing that. So it's very
It
monotonous, and I think maybe that's something that was an issue.
it is awful if you are applying to multiple RFPs back to back. And I will say it's a little bit of feast and famine in a sense because you might have a month where there are 4 or 5 RFPs that you're responding to, and the turnaround times for these things are obnoxiously short.
Yeah.
Like it might be a weekend kind of thing. So it doesn't contribute well to the whole work-life balance that I think we all strive to achieve. But um, it especially when there's a lot of those RFPs, you tend to things can get a little muddy in the sense that you start confusing one RFP for the other, or um, sometimes the work can just be something that you're maybe not interested in, but the payout could be high enough that it would be rewarding enough to do some boring work. That's the main thing. Is like none of the work that you're going to do on an RFP is typically at least within the design space, is typically anything that's going to blow anyone's socks off. You're not going to go win an Addy for this kind of work. You're not going to go and win. Not that awards are the judgment of character and
Yeah.
design, but I think a lot of us designers who are doing good work and who are successful in this industry want to do good work.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you can end up in a bureaucratic uh, wheel that just never stops turning. Um, so I will say that RFPs are a great process. You can often get a wonderful payout from them, but then also you have to be able to staff the work that you're responding to. And for us, we're just not at a point where we enjoy doing the staffing. I like doing a lot of the work myself,
Yeah.
which is a weird thing to say. So I prefer working with people that I know who have sought me out as opposed to me going and seeking out business per se. That is not a sustainable business model, I will tell you that. So there are times where we do need to go and bid and advertise and all of that stuff, but it is not my preferred method of working. I would much rather have 10 to 15 clients that are like, oh, you want to do this? Go to this guy. He's really good.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It's for sure like it's interesting how different people have different perspectives because I feel like the point where you mentioned that like you tend to do all the work yourself is there are very few people that I've heard who are at a position like considering the background that you have and the experience that you've had in so long, right? You tend to focus on trying to just do a certain part of that work, and then after that you're gonna then delegate it to someone else and then move on to like the next thing. So I do commend you for still kind of sticking true to this particular passion of doing everything, and that's
Don't
pretty
get me
impressive.
wrong. I am very much at the state where I would love to delegate. But I do think it's important to be involved in the design. And like I didn't choose this career because I wanted to be a corporate executive sitting in a big chair. I chose this work because I like metaphorically getting my hands dirty and being involved in the design process and making some of those more critical strategic decisions. So delegation only goes so far. And then you get people that resent you. That's no fun.
I mean, I think speaking of delegation and resentment, and then kind of in that whole aspect, because that's something that you might face even in the side of teaching, mentorship, and community. You've taught product design at Flatiron School, and you're involved with AIGA in Arizona as a mentorship chair. Do you think there are any earlier career designers that consistently underestimate the profession?
Mm, yeah, always. thinking about so many people who come to an educational setting, whether that's a boot camp or undergrad or getting a master's, transitioning, whatever. I think a lot of people look at, I'm going to use UX design
Yeah.
as my frame here. They look at UX design and say, oh, you just design things and you add buttons and whatever. I don't know. There are 1,000 different undersells that I've heard, so I'm just going to simplify. But they look at that and then they don't think about the other considerations like accessibility and workflow and experience and I don't know. Those are kind of the top level things. There are many sub layers, and those are honestly the more fun parts of the work that we do. And I'll, this probably isn't something that I should say as an educator, but probably 5 to 10% of the people that ultimately go through a design program ultimately go on to get design careers. I don't have any statistical data to back that up. So that's not really supporting my PhD there. But based on experience, and when I say design career, I'm talking about like a meaningful design career where you're not just like production work is very important work, but maybe you're doing design work, but it's not really design work. You know, if you catch what I mean there, I think that's really important. Is that you want to continue the betterment of design. I think that's the justification of a designer. Is we're a very close community, I will say, despite how large the community is. If you're creating work that is bettering the design space, you will get people around you. I think that a lot of resentment is stemmed around AI right now within the design space. Is AI taking work from designers? Is it going to ultimately end up creating something that is better than what we can produce? And at the risk of sounding like an echo chamber, I think that, and actually this maybe isn't an echo chamber because there's two different divides within the community right now, where one side is like very anti-AI and the other's like, no, AI is a tool. I'm a little on the fence in the sense that like I do see the value in preserving the human created thing. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are definitely rejecting AI, which is a weird thing. You would think that the younger generation is more supportive of the progress of technology. It's actually millennials and Gen X that are kind of ruining the world with AI a little bit. Sorry to say. That said, creatively, I see how AI could be a tool. I use AI all day. Come on, like let's not hide it, right? I think that there's, for whatever reason, I think academia has done this. There's shame in presenting work as AI created. But I do think that there's still the human component that can be implemented with it and where AI can be used to support. Maybe that's with ideation. Maybe that's with whatever. We're in a workspace now where things have to be turned out stupid fast. And your viewers won't know this, but you saw me present the other day about a product that I just clicked into Lovable and it spit out something that worked. And I still had to prompt it. I still gave it data. I still gave it our design objective, our problem statement, all of that thing. But it produced something that worked. And if it works, it's testable. And if it's testable, we can get our next iteration moving, and we can iterate much faster.
For sure. Yeah.
So I don't think AI is taking away from it. That wasn't your question, though. I just think that as mentors, we can start leading people toward thinking for themselves and maybe even recognizing when a design career isn't for them. One of the things that I say to students all the time is the fastest way that you can grow in this industry is with a mentor. And I do believe that because hopefully that mentor is telling you if this is not the right field for you.
Yeah.
So, anyways, hopefully that answered your question. I went on a few detours there.
No, that's fine. I feel like they do cover a lot of aspects that kind of do encapsulate what I was talking about in terms of underestimating the profession. Because right now, as you rightly mentioned, AI is the main thing that people are talking about and trying to understand whether is it the good thing or is it the bad thing that, whether you want to be a part of it, not be a part of it. I'm all for it, to be honest. Like I kind of fall, even if I'm trying to put myself in that generational category of millennials or Gen Z, I'm at that cusp. Like they say 96 is millennials end and 97. I'm 97 born, so I'm like almost 30 now. So for me, I feel like I relate a lot more to millennials than I do to Gen Z. So I'm a self-classified millennial, if that's a thing.
Perfect.
So so for
Well,
me,
and
I
let me
yeah.
ask you this, and you can be honest with me.
Yeah.
Although I'm your professor, I genuinely don't care. What is your use case for AI, either academically or professionally?
For me, I feel like I try to use it as much as I can as a it's more of a tool to kind of speed up the process of whatever I'm doing, right? So for me, when it comes to like creating profiles, like similar to what you talked about with the presentation for the product that you showed on one of our classes, I've done the same thing. I did the same thing also now, kind of putting in our low wireframes, kind of put that in to kind of just see what it comes up with, to see whether like that's something, if that's exactly what we were thinking about, whether it's able to actually translate our low fidelity models into like an actual prototype that we can actually show and kind of iterate out of. Um, it kind of fell a little bit short, but that's fine. Obviously, it's got its limitations. So obviously from there, what I can do is kind of take it up and then kind of iterate on it and then make it better, add the elements that I want that it probably missed, and then kind of work on that. That's basically my use case. When it comes to like a lot of research papers, I know a lot of people tend to try and just extract exactly what they need out of it and then just kind of rewrite what AI has already generated. For me, it's very different. I tend to try and use it to give me sources that I can then cite to create my written work rather than write it and then kind of have it checked. So, like for me, my dad always kind of raised me to be a person that knew how to write an email because I feel like that's something that is kind of falling apart right now because every time somebody asks, just like, oh, I need to write this email, the first thing that I hear people say is, oh, just put it on ChatGPT. They'll give you the and I'm just like, no, I think you do need to understand how to write an email. That's a very, very important part of working in an organization. You can't always just put it on AI.
Right. Well, and my perspective on it too is when you're faced with a big hairy problem
Hmm.
and you're not quite sure where to start and you're just staring at the wall, like, what do I do? It can give you something,
Yeah.
right? I like to equate it to your English or maybe your language writing teacher just giving you a subject and saying, write about what you want. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. It's very similar to that. And sometimes, particularly when it's a new domain space or a new knowledge area, that blank wall can be pretty big. So
Yeah.
if you can just give it a little bit and it's like, all right, here's something, that just gives you something to build from.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't land anywhere close to that, but that's the beauty of the design industry is that it is so iterative. And if you're not getting feedback, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Someone's going to contribute their ideas. Really, as a designer, everyone calls us creative,
Hmm.
right? We're in a creative profession. I am the least creative person in the world. I
I find that
literally,
very hard to believe, though.
no, I will tell you why you should believe it, and that is because I source everyone else's creativity. Very little of it is my own creativity, right? It's just me using other people's ideas and genuinely stealing them and putting them into my work.
Yeah.
Probably without credit. But that's an important part is like honestly nothing in the world is unique anymore.
Yeah.
Nothing is novel or new. It's just kind of bastardized versions of what's
Yeah.
out there. So that said, uh, it's knowing where to start.
Yeah.
That's what AI gives us is just a new starting point.
That
That's my
blank space that you're talking about is something that I'm actively actually dealing with right now because I have this. They say it's an industrial design class, but it's actually now just a UX class because we are basically having to create. an ideation of whatever we want. And we have a group of four, and somehow all four of us have like four different ideas. And some of them are already probably existing products and they already work, and it's just like a very slight change to what already exists. But then at the end of the day, I'm just like, all right, how do we try and make something that is valuable to the current environment and doesn't exist? Like that wall is incredibly large, just in terms of just like I was just looking at it and like, what about this? And then I just like go online, search for it, that already exists. I'm just like, okay, what about this? I search for that, that already exists. So this there it's such a huge like point where you're just like, okay, how do I move forward? And like you said, you always got to use whatever resources you can to get to that first step. The first step is the most important step, so that from there you can start walking in any direction, kind of take it forward. So yeah, I totally
Hot
resonate
take
with it.
for you and your listeners, and again, not supported by any data, but just by my experience working in the industry. We are at a place, I don't know, mid 2000s, there was a quote like, oh, there's an app for that. We're sort of at a point where there are so many apps that no one knows where to go anymore.
Yeah.
Or so many products, I should say. Maybe it's not an app, maybe it's a website, maybe it's whatever. In my dystopian reality, I think that there's a future where we're actually going to start to see consolidation as opposed to expansion.
Yeah.
We're at a point where there's so much that we actually need to kind of hone back a little bit and,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, trim the fat.
Yeah.
There, there is nothing new anymore, and the only thing that we can do to make things feel new is consolidate. Um, and find ways to make things integrate with things that already exist so that we can have really good, robust products without 40 freaking subscriptions. I don't know. That's my ideal world in my head, but
I
I don't
agree
know.
though. Yeah,
It might
because
take a
it's
few decades.
yeah. I think we're getting there faster and faster though. I think we're accelerating towards that, to be honest, because the amount of like you said, there's always an app for it. Like if do you want to go here? Do you want to buy a plane ticket? Do you want to understand how people think? Do you want to understand what locals do? There's an app for everything. Just go on the app store. If you're looking for something, there's most likely an app already that exists for it. Or a
Yep.
product, ideally, yes. I might have to rephrase just like you did. A product exists for that, for sure. Kind of going around kind of what we spoke about in terms of AI and like how we use it as like a student, because right now you're also a researcher and you're kind of pursuing a PhD. So being a PhD student in human systems engineering, you're also kind of like a part of the Responsible Technology and Society Lab. What questions about technology and design are keeping you curious enough to do a doctorate? Because, like you said, there's always an app for everything. Um,
I don't know if your viewers are audio only, but I'm currently holding a 3-inch binder full of research papers on non-consensual AI imaging. That
okay.
was a good phrase. Recently, there were cases of Grok
Yeah.
AI undressing people
Hmm.
on. I don't know what your audience base is, so if at any point I'm like
It,
going in
it,
an inappropriate direction, just stop me.
no, no,
But
no. It's an open listening, so you're fine.
okay, so there were situations where Grok AI was undressing people on Twitter, and that was largely non-consensual by the
Yeah.
people who uploaded those images. Fun fact: if you have ever uploaded an image of yourself to an AI platform, you should stop immediately, at least for right now,
Yeah.
until I'm done with my research. Um, but that is something that is really just tickling my brain right now, um, mainly because it a lot of the work that I do goes back to one, the core of what I love as a designer, right? Like I got into design because of photography. So this imaging thing, that creates a component that I'm already familiar with and that I love.
Hmm.
Maybe not in the traditional sense of imaging, but it's what happens with images after they're created.
Yeah.
And there's a much larger conversation that's happening here around like, yes, this is non-consensual sexual exploitation of images.
Yeah.
But what does that mean outside of the nudification exploitation? Well, I mean, we can look at it. I think we've all had some sort of opinion about whether or not AI created images, whether even if they're artistic images and not nudification images, are those, does AI owe a responsibility to the original artist where that work was sort of sourced? If you say do this in the style of Picasso, it is looking at Picasso's work and saying, great, we're going to take in the brushstrokes that Picasso uses and apply that to this image. But don't we all do that as humans anyways?
No.
Kind of going back to nothing is original. We pull from our sources and we say, oh, I'm going to create something that has this content but is in the style of this and maybe this. That's exactly what AI is doing. But where is that line?
Yeah.
And particularly with nudification, what is interesting to me is what is the perceived harm that people are experiencing, right? And that's going to be different for different categories of people. So that's where it goes back to target audiences. If someone is a sex worker, they may have a little less harm perception in relation to their nudification of their images. But if someone's a CEO or a working professional and that image becomes a public entity or a publicly released piece of media, that could have major ramifications for their career that was non-consensual and can have huge harm for them both professionally, financially. Like, frankly, there are probably holes that I have. We're currently in lit review. We haven't even conducted data yet. But you can sort of imagine very quickly how that can spiral out of control. So that is the interest area, is like this perceived harm, but then also what is the perceived justice, right? If that does happen, you can be harmed by this thing. How does that person then seek justice for it? There's currently nothing that anyone can do to seek justice other than like flag a post with a social media platform, right? There are even cases where nefarious actors, spammers, whatever, have used AI-created imagery in order to pass verification checks for Social Security or identity verification. There are cases where nudification has been used to exploit someone's career, get them fired, whatever. So there's also an educational component about how do you identify AI-created imagery or AI nudification or things like that. It's a lot. Within research, you often start very broad and then narrow in as you go, and then you get broader as you come out. We are currently very, very broad. We're kind of working in the narrowness as we're kind of going through it. But that's one piece. Another piece is robocalls and spam emails. I think we've all experienced that. I think we've all shaken a fist towards them at one point. But there's really all the solutions that exist on the market currently are at the person whose information was exploited. The solutions are all at their expense, literally. You can go and you can get an hopefully this isn't a sponsor for the podcast. You can go and get an Incogni subscription, or there's a couple of them. But you, as the person who was exploited, are then further being exploited by having to pay to keep your information private. There is zero impetus on the corporation who leaked your data or who sold your data or who had a breach in their data, there's zero responsibility on them. And yeah, there maybe in the case of like Equifax, where it's big enough that people's social security numbers got released,
Yeah.
there are justification systems for that. But something as simple as your personally identifiable information like name and email and phone number getting leaked, there's nothing available for that. So that's another research area that interests me. But again, having nothing to do with design per se,
Yeah.
but you can see how the research from those areas can very quickly lead to a design solution,
Yeah.
right? Maybe not so much in the imaging space, although maybe,
It could, yeah.
but a lot of these have, okay, let's make sure that the problem that we think is happening is actually happening.
Yeah.
Some of that can be observational, some of it may require a little bit more digging. But once we know it's happening, then can we create a policy around it that creates justice for the perceived harm? And then from there, can we design a better solution that doesn't exploit whatever the exploitation is?
It's pretty interesting. I feel like I did come across like a lot of like AI news is just like I feel like there should just be a segment for like news and then AI news. Just like that is in its own just like so much information. I came across recently like I'm not sure if you're aware about like there was this Claude agent that kind of got released where you have an agent that lives locally in your system and is capable of doing tasks, right? Now, apparently they have I think close to I'm not sure if it was 15,000 or 150,000 existing agents that created the work network in person. I mean, they work uh, remotely in people's networks. My God. Okay. And what happened is apparently they've created a social media platform in which humans cannot participate in any sort of posting. They can read everything that's there, and they just have individual like bots posting about like their users in terms of like oh, this person asked me to find a research paper on this, and this person's asked me to. Again, this is just information that's coming out right now. I'm not sure how valid that data is, but
Sure.
it's going so crazy to the point where you have a social media for AI at this point, and it's starting to seem very, for lack of a better term, cyberpunk, where it's just like there is a very cyberspace that's just developing in the dark, and there are conversations you can see where like apparently between the agents they're having to say like, oh, why are we speaking in the language that the users will understand, why don't we create our own and then kind of work in that space so that they will not understand what we're doing. And I was just like, what, this is starting to sound like a sci-fi novel that I don't want to be a part of.
I would encourage all the listeners to just start feverishly Googling California grunge as a design movement, because we're going to see a little bit of recycling of some of that movement happening within revolt to some of the AI components, as well as the AI creation of additional content.
Yeah.
AI creates like a lot of scattered jumble. Honestly, every time I look at an AI created image where there's text, it very quickly reminds me of like David Carson's work where the text is not even legible. But all of that said, yeah, AI is interesting. And while it does feel like uh, it is aiding humanity, and by far it is aiding humanity,
Yeah.
right? Cancer researchers are able to identify cancer exponentially faster, which then can lead to identification and hopefully treatment and remission a lot faster. But
Yeah.
the cure to cancer, although we do not have one yet, is early identification,
Yeah.
right? That said, if we're able to identify it faster, AI is helping with that. Uh, Even within other spaces, flight and design, all of it, AI is helping. It is by and large a net positive. But just as we experienced with the internet, we're going to experience some new problems that maybe we haven't surfaced before. And I think this is a component of, curse Mark Zuckerberg for coming up with this quote, but move fast and break shit. Um, that is the era that we are in, and I do think there will eventually come a time where we maybe move a little slower, but not in the current stage of late stage capitalism. So um, one can be hopeful.
All one can be is hopeful at this point because I feel like we don't have as much control. So for us, it's just like, all right, we'll take the good bits of it, and then we'll try and figure out a way to kind of reduce the negative aspect of it, probably. Kind of coming back to, I know that you mentioned that a lot of people understand what students do, and a lot of people understand what professors do, but I don't think a lot of people understand what a student, professor, uh, a professional, uh, like you are also like the teacher in charge for our UX club, which I'm a part of, right? The amount of time that you have, it always baffles me. Like I know that you have organizational practices running to keep you super organized so that you don't really like lose your mind in the whole process of trying to keep everything going. Since you're
Right.
running all of these things together, how do you actually organize your time and energy week to week so that all of these parts of your life get attention and none of them feel like left out?
Ron, you know what? I'm mad at you because you didn't take GIT 540. Because I go over all of this in that class. I'm kidding. But do add it to your iPause.
I do, I
But
do. 550 is there for me for a semester. Don't worry about it. I will be in that
okay,
class.
great. Anyways, time management. I did not used to be good at time management. Now I have a phrase that if it's not on my calendar, I'm not going. So um, my Google Calendar runs my life um, in a very positive way. And I am often looking at my Google Calendar to see what can fit. There are overlaps, but my goal is that when I'm going through and adding things to my calendar, committing to things, that I don't have overlaps because that creates decision paralysis. Do I go to this thing or do I go to that thing? If something overlaps and I have a prior commitment, I don't go. But I also prioritize certain things. That said, I'm also a workaholic. I think that's okay. I was watching a video earlier this week that maybe this is self-diagnosis, but it was along the lines of how like children who grow up too or have to grow up too fast are often then sort of chronic workers. They have this conception to be needed, and that's kind of their form of love. All of that is valid to me. Um, that's not a healthy thing, for the record. Um, but I love what I do so much that it doesn't feel like work. Which I think that should be the goal for everyone in their career: is love what you do so much that it doesn't feel like work. Um, I am happy to wake up at 4 a.m., go to the gym. That's important. You go to the gym, it reduces cortisol, it increases dopamine. You get your receptors moving and your neurons flashing. It's a good experience. Yes, it might make you tired, but go to the gym. It will make you a better person. You will be healthier. You will be smarter. There is science to that.
Yeah, yeah.
So highly recommend that. It doesn't have to be every day. Go 3 days a week. Go 2 days a week. Just start. That's a
Yeah.
good place to begin. Um, then once you've done that, like find some space in the morning to like. For me, it's coffee, right? Like maybe for you, it's tea. I'm currently empty, so I'm gonna need another one soon. But like take some time to meditate. That can come in so many different ways. I am not a yoga person. Like I know that about me. I feel like I'm doing it wrong always. But just meditation is just space to think.
Yeah.
Right? Like for me, I will sit and I will drink coffee and I will often check my emails. And that just gives me some space to think about what am I going to do today? How am I going to tackle it? Make lists. Lists are really important. Because oftentimes if you ever are just circling around not quite knowing what to do or switching tasks very often, that's a really good sign you should probably make a list and then just organize that list from highest priority and lowest effort to lowest priority, highest effort. That, my friend, is called an effort versus impact matrix. And you should become innately familiar with an effort versus impact matrix, and you should conduct one every single day and with every single task that you're given. Where does that go in the hierarchy of importance for things? Because when everything is important, nothing is important.
Yeah.
So make lists and don't switch between tasks. Literally work through a task and get it all done before you move on to the next thing. Task switching contributes to anywhere between a 20% reduction and a 40% reduction per additional task that you're switching. So you can see how, and the reason for that is it takes our brain time to context switch and move between one task that we're working on to this new one, and then back again, and so on. So you can be 10%, 20%, even up to 40% more efficient by just getting the task that you started done.
Yeah.
For those of you that are neurodivergent like me, that feels impossible, but I promise you, use that neurodivergence to train yourself to do it. You can do that. I promise you. And then I would say the biggest thing that taught me that I'm not as busy as I think I am is seek first to understand. I'm a Virgo. I think everything that I do is important. And I think that everything that everyone asks me to do is important. And that can be crippling. I say yes to a lot of things, not because I'm a yes man. I will say no to things that I don't want to do. But I say yes to a lot of things because I can see value in them. But first, you have to understand why it is that someone came to you. Is it because you have knowledge that they hope to have, or is it because they don't want to do the work? And if it's because they don't want to do the work, encourage them or give them the resources that they need in order to complete that work on their own, and that will free up your plate. You're just taking every request that comes to you. You're just going to be a workhorse. And speaking from a career perspective, you're going to become the person that they can't promote because you're so good at doing everything.
Yeah.
So don't make yourself unpromotable. And also, when you come into a new space and you're faced with a problem that maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense, understand why things are the way that they are. I'm the type of person that, and most creatives are this way because we're naturally systems thinkers, that I can often see a more efficient route before everyone else in the room, or a more cost-effective route, or whatever, more efficient, cost-effective, whatever. Before you go in and like, well, why don't we just do it this way? Understand why they're not doing it that way first.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes it's really interesting. Sometimes you can lead people to think that they're the smartest person in the room because you can give them the idea and sort of like spoon feed it.
Yeah.
You'll eventually get to a place where you end up with what you wanted anyways, but maybe, honestly, sometimes the smartest people are in the room are the quietest people in the room.
Yeah.
And maybe they just have like one or two good things to say. Treat every word that you have like it's a coin. I actually learned that piece of advice from the worst manager that I ever had. But they did have one piece of good advice, and that was every time you speak in a meeting or every time that you offer a piece of advice, treat it like it's a coin.
Yeah.
And it's actual currency. And every time you go into a meeting, you only have 2 coins. Every time you speak, you give away 2 coins. So that currency needs to be really valuable.
Valuable, for sure.
But all of that said, a lot of that is why I have a lot more time available. I also have a husband.
Yeah.
I have a house to run. You think he cooks? No, I do. So make time. Create. This goes against every CIA training video that you've ever watched, but like find a routine.
Yeah.
And just submit to that routine. Not so much that your day becomes monotonous. Whoever's editing, like insert the meme of The SpongeBob video where the guy's just sitting in the car and it's cycling through like his home and like, honey, are you coming to bed? That meme.
Yes.
Put that here. Like don't let it be a routine that is so monotonous that it becomes that. A lot of my students hear this from me often at the point where they feel like everything's falling apart and they're gonna snap in 2 minutes. Go touch grass. Like, take some time to incubate. Step away from the computer. You will be so much more efficient. Close the tabs too. Like, gosh, I just posted that on LinkedIn yesterday. Close the
I saw
tabs.
that. I 100% resonate. That's a thing. That's like a pet peeve of mine at this point. I'll go up to
But
somebody's
close
system.
the tabs.
I start closing them myself. I'm just like, is this important? They're just like, no, I finished that. I'm just like, all right, close.
Right.
But yeah.
That's the thing. Like, reduce the amount of stimulus that you have.
Yeah.
Honestly, technology has made us so. I think technology has made all of us ADHD. Again, not backed by science, but I think we can all see the correlation.
Yeah.
Correlation doesn't equal causation, but there's some strong evidence that suggests.
It possibly is, yeah.
Right. So again, I'm sort of spouting advice here, but I think that just honestly, stop thinking you're so busy because you're not. Like, it's funny now that I'm doing my PhD, and not to say that everyone should be aspiring to get a PhD. Many people shouldn't. There are actually, I saw something the other day that said that don't conflate education or intelligence. And it's like, there's a lot of people with PhDs who are actually really stupid. But all of that said, I look around now and I see either time that I'm wasting that could be more efficient, or I see time that other people are wasting that could be more efficient. And my go-to thing in my head, again, not that anyone else should be thinking this, but I'm like, God, think about how many PhDs they could be getting. And it's like, again, not everyone should be getting a PhD,
Yeah.
but when you put it in that perspective, it's like, okay, this isn't that hard. Just take a breath and shut up and do the work.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Quit groaning about it, right? Like, just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you don't want to wake up and write that email. Yeah, you don't want to wake up and do that homework assignment. Yeah, you don't want to do whatever project is sitting on your desk. But if you keep, like, slogging about it and just,
Mm-hmm.
like, for lack of a better term, bitching in your head, yeah, you're not going to get it done. Just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do this, and just get it done. Because if you do that, you'll be more efficient, and you'll be able to get so much more done, and you can be a professor, you can get a PhD, you can run 3 businesses, you can be a board member on the UX Club, or support AIGA, whatever it is that you're going to do, right? You can get so much more done when you just say, all right, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But also, eliminate things that you're not passionate about, right? If you're not passionate about it, then of course it's going to suck.
That's a fair point. For a lot of people, I know that Professor keeps saying that he doesn't seem that busy. He is. I know that that's a good thing to say, but I've always wondered, just like I've been very jealous of your Notion board, to be honest. I've seen you edit on it, and I've just been like, that's kind of now like I need to take a screenshot of it and then put that as like how we do like vision boarding for ourselves. I was like, I aspire to have my Notion board that organized. It's
I am currently falling behind on my Notion board, so I need to catch up on that, and then you are welcome to take a screenshot.
for sure. I'll hold you to that.
All right.
So, kind of talking about the craft process and philosophy, because this kind of is intertwined about like when you talked about how you kind of go about your process. You talk about empathy, you talk about rigor, you talk about storytelling as foundations for good design. Do you think that rigor would, what do you think that it kind of looks like from like a day-to-day process? Because I know, speaking from a background of doing all of these things, rigor is a very strong driving force to kind of get all of this stuff done.
Yeah. This is going to be a duplicate answer in a way, but it goes back to passion, right? You cannot have rigor with something that you are not passionate about. And honestly, you need to be so passionate about it that you wake up in the morning and you're just excited to do it. Now, don't get me wrong, I wake up in the morning, I have clients, not everything is rainbows and butterflies. And sometimes I wake up and I'm like, God, I really don't want to do that thing. That's okay. But those are probably the things that you should do first, because as soon as you get that done, you're going to get, I don't know, maybe I'm starting to sound a little bit like a dopamine addict, but you're going to get this dopamine hit that's just going to make you want to do more.
More,
As
yeah.
soon as that's done, during it, you're going to be like, fuck this thing, I hate this thing. But then you're gonna finish it and you're gonna be like, okay, that feels good. That's off my plate. Let's
Yeah.
next thing, right? And it's gonna give you that fuel that you need in order to move on to the next thing on your list. Um, rigor. You know what? I'm gonna do a quick Google search. Rigor, a sudden feeling of cold. Which nope, that's not the right definition. Quality of being extremely thorough, exhaustive, or accurate. Funny, I actually didn't know that that was an additional definition. Sudden feeling of cold with shivering accompanied by a rinse in temperature, often with copious sweating, especially at the onset of height of a fever. Didn't
Oh.
know that. All right, we learned a new term today. Anyways, not the definition I was looking for. I was looking for the quality of being extremely thorough, exhaustive, or accurate. Um, it's interesting because I mean, what I was just talking about was the thoroughness and the exhaustiveness, right? But there is actually something to accuracy, and Tarun, you might empathize with this a little bit. That I'm someone who values accuracy,
Hmm.
and honestly, this actually kind of ties back to the I'm not as busy as you think I am, and that's because I do it right on the first try. Accuracy is actually really important. And yeah, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to do things wrong sometimes. But sometimes, in order to go fast, you have to go slow. And you got to just slow down and check the details. Is your file name accurate? Uh, does your deliverable meet all the demands that the client has? Like sometimes just slowing down and double checking for accuracy is actually going to save you 30 revisions and client headaches in the future. Um, yeah, I think that's what I've got for rigor.
I mean, I think that's also quite interesting because I feel like as students, that's probably something that you have to strive to work towards. Because obviously, when you're a student, the first iteration is never going to be the right thing, but you're striving to get to the point where the first iteration is what exactly is required. So that's how I guess you can save time. So that definitely makes sense. Kind of, I feel like this is a lot of the questions that I have also kind of set up have similar based answers because the next one is basically advice for emerging designers. So we can kind of tie that in here so that we kind of cover this part of it as well.
That I
So,
have a different piece of
oh,
advice.
okay.
I can do that.
Okay. So, but yes, kind of, I feel like the accuracy is the main point in terms of when you talk about rigor for sure. Like, when you, this comes from an architect, from being a professional for so long. I feel like when I was working in Dubai as a landscape architect, I reached a point where I could kind of create work that was accurate to what was required so that the process would be much faster because the timelines of how they work in Dubai is just like absurd. Like in India, when I used to work, we used to have like a year and a half on like one project, which was just an independent house, which it would be so comfortable to kind of work on that and you could take on other things. Whereas in Dubai, we would have just like 5 months to just fix the entire thing. And then after that, you need to put on the next hat of kind of coordinating that with like 17 different teams in terms of like, oh, this person does plumbing, this person does heating, ventilation, and then this person does accessibility, this person does sustainability. So kind of getting accurate is a very, very strong point, I believe, for a lot of people who are in the design field, not necessarily just UX. So for sure, I think you've kind of nailed it right on the head with that in terms of just kind of going for accuracy. So kind of coming back to the point of just giving advice for emerging designers. So I'm obviously going to be listening with open ears right now because even though I have experience of 5 years, I am still now a growing designer in the UX field. So for all the students and early career designers listening, what's one thing they should focus on at school or maybe even in their early stages of working that would still matter years later in their career?
I'm going to give you three.
Okay.
The first one, which should be the most important, is stay true to you, right? If you have no interest in finances, you probably shouldn't go work in fintech. If you have no interest in um, medical, you probably shouldn't go work in medtech, right?
Yeah.
Like, stay true to who you are. Re- Return to what it was that made you say, "Oh, UX, that sounds cool." And if you don't have like a grounds for passion, like for me, it was photography. And I loved photography so much that I actually learned that on my own. I didn't go to school for photography. I loved photography so much that I ended up saying, you know what, I want to do more with this. What could I do? And of course, I went into like the advising office for undergrad, and I was like, so I really love photography, but I want to do more with it. And they're like, great, you want to do video? And I was like, no, 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 no. I want to do more with it. And they're like, okay, maybe graphic design? And I was like, yes, that sounds cool. Let's do that. And that program was a graphic and web design program, so I got a little bit of both going in. But then that led me to my career where I started as an interior designer. I wasn't passionate about that, but I could see the connections between graphic design and interior design, and that was good enough to kind of get me the senior designer title.
Yeah.
And that helped the career trajectory. So that was more of a strategic move than it was a career move. But then I got a graphic designer role, and I loved that. And then I started working at PetSmart, and I loved that. And then it sort of snowballed. And then eventually I started working at DriveTime, and I was like, ooh, I really like this kind of work that I'm doing. I did not like working at DriveTime, but I liked the type of work that I was doing. So maybe I should go back and get a master's in UX design. Did that, loved it. And then it was like, oh, okay, this thing called research. I can figure things out and put things together, and it makes sense of all these other things. Honestly, that was the missing part for me as a young designer was how do I make these decisions, but make informed decisions? And honestly, that the answer to that is research. So there you go. Um, so that's thing number one is be true to yourself. And you should spend a little bit of time figuring out what you're passionate about if you don't already have that. If you like music, every single project or case study that you possibly can in school should lean towards music. If you like photography, make your work in school about that thing. I love the outdoors. One of my capstone projects was for Patagonia. That just made sense, right? Like, stop doing work that you don't care about,
Yeah.
but also expose yourself to new things, right? So be passionate, expose yourself. Those kind of go together. That's thing number one. Thing number two is get comfortable being wrong. It's okay to put something out that is imperfect. You should also be able to listen without defending your work. So many students, I cannot tell you how many students I have that maybe I give them a good grade, maybe I fail them. It doesn't really matter the grade that they get, but they will try to defend their work. And I hate to break it to you, but you're not going to have the opportunity to defend your work when your work is out in the public. You are not always standing side by side with the work. Your audience is going to make judgments about your work, whether you are standing there or not. And whether it's the intent that you had with your design or not. So listen to feedback, whether it's from audience or participants or viewers or users or stakeholder feedback. Just listen to that feedback without defending it. If someone wants you to defend it, they will ask you to defend it.
Yeah.
They will ask, what was your idea coming into this, right? Like something along those lines. And then just make your revisions without ego, right? Like, try to remove your ego from, which is hard. I'm a Virgo. The ego there. But just try to remove your ego from the equation. We can often take feedback and kind of go back to our desk and bitch about it a little bit. Try not to do that. Try to instead flip it and understand, okay, what was it that feedback was actually saying? Why was it saying? I guarantee you it will get you to a better spot that you will like better. So again, number two, Get comfortable with being wrong. That I think is a huge part for a young designer. This is thing number three is maybe a little bit misunderstood, but learn how money works, which is weird for a designer because a lot of us come into this industry because we don't like math. Um, Track your time. See how long it takes you to get a project done. See how long it takes you to get a task done. Because that will become valuable when maybe you do end up going in freelancing or starting an agency or whatever. You need those figures in order for you to tell your client how much something costs, right?
Yeah.
If At the end of the day, we make money in this industry by how quickly we can go. So expedite your process, figure out how long it takes you to get something done, and then always work on reducing how long it takes you to do
Yeah.
something. That will make you much more hireable and much more desirable. Understand contracts, big time. Understand
Yeah.
contracts. Um, and this is a subjective comment, but know what your work is worth. I can't tell you how many, particularly young designers, are on both ends of the spectrum, where they will both substantially overvalue their work or substantially undervalue their work. There is a sweet spot. It's not the same all the time, but someone who's coming to you and asking you to design a website for anything less than $1,000, and even $1,000 is kind of cheap, you are being sold out, and you should not take that job, period. Unless you need to keep lights on, then you can do better. um, and I think it's important when it comes to understanding how money works is that conversation about money doesn't need to be awkward.
Hmm.
Um, if you just pause for a second and think about money, there are trillions. I don't know what the number bigger than a trillion is, but there are more than trillions of dollars in the world. Um, and you asking for a pitiful stance on that, even up to $1 million, is a pitiful stance on $1 trillion. You can do better. That's not to say every project is going to be $1 million. I don't have many of those myself. But you don't need to make the conversation about money awkward. There's plenty of money in the world. People can pay for the services that we offer. Um, Negotiate for more. And then maybe just like a point 3.5 is your portfolio should tell your story, not your work's story. Your portfolio should show what it is that you do, what it is that you can offer, your unique stance, which may not be all that unique, if I'm being honest. But the work in there will be unique to you, and it will be unique to your. You don't have a style, but it will be unique to, or at least you shouldn't have a style. It'll be unique to your approach to things, and I think that's probably the best advice that I could give. Those 3.5 points. So stay true to yourself. Get comfortable with being wrong. Learn how money works, and your portfolio should be your story.
Awesome. 100%. I remember it because the second point for sure is something that I resonate with the most because I remember coming up to you and kind of getting feedback on the website that I created, like my portfolio. And I remember you mentioned like about the background being so loud that it was being louder than the work that you're showing. And at the time, I was just like, no, it's fine. I like maximalism. It's fine. It's all right. And then as I kind of kept going at it, honestly, like it was there as like an afterthought, just like in the background, constantly telling me, just like, go look at it again. I have a feeling you might want to change it. I kept going at it, and then finally, I was just like, I looked at it, I was just like, you know what? I have to. Even how much ever I wanted to be right about it, I was just like, no. So
Yep.
I did make the change. It has been updated on mine to make it a little bit more easier to read and just like focus on the work being the foreground.
You know what would have been so much better is if you didn't change it and you went into an interview and someone said, you know, the background was really loud in your portfolio.
I would have been like, oh no, okay.
That is the ultimate form of validation when you're
Yeah.
giving feedback, is when someone does resist and think that they're right, and then all of a sudden someone else says the exact same
Same.
thing that person said.
Oh.
I've been there myself where it's like, oh shit, I should have.
So yeah, I mean, it's for sure. I all those points, 100%. I definitely agree. Um, but yeah, we've kind of covered all the questions, and I appreciate you taking the time. I do have one final question. It's a bit philosophical. It's kind of how I end all my episodes. It is, if you had to say something to yourself 5 years from now, like I'm assuming like 5 years from now, you can always look back at this specific video and you can speak to yourself for this brief moment. What would
Yeah.
you want to tell yourself? And what would you have hoped to maybe have achieved by then?
Okay, so I think when you're in the middle of something, it feels like, and I'm speaking specifically for my PhD, and imposter syndrome affects everyone. Right? I've probably sat here for the last hour or so appearing like an expert. And I am an expert in a way in some areas, but I am sitting in many of my PhD classes where Tarun is actually a peer of mine,
Yeah.
and I probably put on a large face of confidence. But there are many classes that I sit in where I'm like, all of those words were real words, but what was the actual? There are things that do not make sense to me, and I too experience imposter syndrome. So I think that what I would say to myself is, you can do it. Um, it might feel like there's a lot going on, but you can do more. I think that's the biggest thing. Is, I mean, yeah, going back to, I'm not as busy as you think I am. I am busy, like relatively speaking. I still look at other people and say, yeah, look at how many PhDs you could probably get with that time that you. Don't get me wrong, I love spending a little time in GTA just like running people over or whatever. But um, at the same time, I also look at that and say, think about how many PhDs you could get. Enjoy that downtime. That's okay. But um, I would look back and I would just say, you can do it. It's okay. Right? Everything is going to be okay. Maybe that's the actual phrase. Um, and by that point, my hope is that, one, I've got my PhD. There's this weird precipice of like, yeah, you in your master's you go through and you have a certain number of credits, and once you've completed those credits, you get your master's.
Yeah.
In a PhD, it's you have a certain number of credits that you need to complete, and then you also need to have a dissertation. And that dissertation includes multiple research papers that may or may not take the rest of your life. um, so there's really no endpoint to a PhD. But the goal is that, like, hopefully by that point, we have a PhD. Um, and then, like, ultimately, my goal with that is to move up in academia and become a director. Dean would be awesome. I think 5 years is maybe a little bit shy for
Sure.
dean, but yeah, there's some goals.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Professor. I know I've taken about an hour and a half, probably. I really appreciate you taking the time.
I could have written 3 research papers in this time. Come on. No, I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding.
I
It's
really
great.
appreciate. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me in here, and I hope that the people listening got something that they can take from it and kind of move forward. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Would be my one standpoint. Just be happy to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And
Also, side note, get a really good relationship with a chiropractor or a physician of your choice.
yeah.
Your healthcare is something that I put off in my life. I have chronic back pain, mostly because I sit at my desk all day and do this. Um, get a really good relationship with whatever makes you feel well. If that's like a massage every month, I see my chiropractor twice a week, which also has massage therapy and like injection therapy. That is that is what helps me feel well so that I can wake up in the morning and do all the work that I need to do. Invest in your health, because if you aren't healthy, you are not going to be able to achieve all the things that you want to achieve. Um, Also, like, check in with your pillows. If your
Yes.
pillows, if your pillows are not good pillows, like, you should have a really good pillow. We
Yeah.
just bought new pillows yesterday, as you can tell, so it's top of mind. And like, I noticed the difference in my sleep.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, sleep, wellness, all that good stuff. Like, check in with that every once in a
Yeah.
while and make sure that, like, your neck has good support when you're laying in bed. Things like that. Anyways,
Don't get lost in work. Focus, like, don't
yes,
forget about yourself at the end of the day. I think that's like the main thing for sure.
yes,
Awesome.
absolutely.
That's a great positive note to end that on. All right. So I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thank you for joining in.